What's up everyone, welcome to my channel. I'm Ryan Becker and every week I drop a new video where I discuss absurd issues in religion, culture, and society. This week's absurdity, the Jerry Falwell Jr. scandal. If this is your first time here, thanks for checking out my channel. And if you want to keep engaging with my content, make sure to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and share this video with a friend. There's a lot going on in America, from Trump hosting a campaign rally on the White House lawn to everything happening in Kenosha, Wisconsin with the tragic shooting of Jacob Blake, not to mention Kyle Rittenhouse. Everything going on is important, but unfortunately, YouTube isn't my full-time job and I can only get to so much each video. And I promise I will get to those subjects. This week, I'm focusing on the Jerry Falwell Jr. scandal, as I believe there's more at stake in what Jerry Falwell represents than just another Christian leader and prominent figure falling to yet another sex scandal. See, I believe that what's happening with Falwell represents a much bigger problem that lies just under the surface of everything within Christianity. And while it's blatantly obvious once you know it, many Christians seem to be missing it. If you didn't know about any of this, Reuters published a verified story this week that Jerry, the Liberty University president, and his wife Becky Falwell were involved in a consensual, ongoing sexual relationship with a hotel worker they met in 2012 when the worker was 21. Hours prior, Falwell released an apology statement regarding an inappropriate photo he posted to his social media a little while back, and then also very blatantly tried to get ahead of the Reuters article by painting the pool boy, Giancarlo Granda, as nothing more than an extortionist. He claimed that he knew nothing of the relationship, that it was only between Becky and Giancarlo, and that he and Becky had reconciled, but the whole ordeal had taken a toll on Falwell's mental health, leading him to eventually posting the picture I mentioned earlier. The problem is, Reuters didn't just have an article or an interview with an extortionist. They had receipts. A phone call was released between Becky, Giancarlo, and Jerry that clearly shows that Jerry knew what was going on. The claim from Giancarlo is that he would have sex with Becky while Jerry would watch, and that this activity went on for years. There's also the fact that Jerry shelled out $1.8 million to help buy and renovate a youth hostel for Giancarlo to run, despite having no experience as a manager, which, ironically enough, sitting right next to a property Falwell owns, was used as a hotbed for promiscuity and sexual activity since. Personally, I don't really care what the Falwells do in their own home and in their own bedroom. I'm not one of those Christians or pastors that cares strongly about knowing personal details about other Christians. What I do have a problem with is that Falwell is the president of a Christian university, which stands in direct opposition to everything I mentioned above and more that Falwell has done. He helped lead Trump to gaining overwhelming white evangelical support in 2016. Representing an overwhelming majority of white Christian voters. He stands for the GOP definition of family values, and as president of a university which claims those values, he endorsed, taught, and encouraged adherence to those values, while the entire time he was using his position and money and influence for personal gain, politically, sexually, and professionally. And while his hypocrisy and outright betrayal of all of those he claimed to lead and have authority over angers me and hurts me to see, what infuriates me and deeply concerns me is so much more than that. Falwell Jr.'s story represents something much more dangerous to Christianity, its witness, this country, and even threatens people internationally: Christianity's obsession with power. Reading the Bible will give you a very vivid idea of what God's preference is in regard to how people should treat one another within power structures. The more you read about how Jesus lived and see the teachings in the Bible, the more you will see that the Bible calls not for the accumulation or consolidation of power, but that it calls for the distribution of power. Within the proper Christian worldview, when someone gains power, they should seek to empower others, serve others, and ultimately give that power away as much as reasonably can be expected. Those with the most power should consider themselves the biggest servants. Empower others, don't seek power over others. Here's a good starting point for verses that demonstrate this idea. But look at even Jesus himself, who at any point could have easily broken free from the cross and conquered all of Rome single-handedly. Instead, the man with the most power subjected himself to the authority of others that had less of it. In fact, the only times we see Jesus really get mad are when those with power and authority in the religious world are wielding it inappropriately for selfish gain and harming those entrusted to them. Yet in 2016, Trump took the stage in Sioux City, Iowa, and said the following:
I will tell you, Christianity is under siege, whether we want to talk about it or we don't want to talk about it. And yet we don't exert the power that we should have. We are getting less and less and less powerful in terms of a religion and in terms of a force. And by the way, Christianity will have power without having to form, because if I'm there, you're going to have plenty of power. You don't need anybody else. You're going to have somebody representing you very, very well. Remember that.
The fear of losing ground, of losing the moral majority, has been the driving force behind election decisions for decades for so many Christians worried about creeping compromise and slippery slopes. The problem with that fear is that it gets manipulated and stoked by others who need the vote of that majority. Christians become so obsessed with keeping what they have that they are willing for others to suffer so their preferences for life can be maintained. Falwell Jr. represents so many Christians who have become so obsessed with power that they will do anything to gain it and then keep it, even cozying up to people like Trump, who have demonstrated anything but the family values the party claims to celebrate. The issue with this, too, is that it becomes increasingly difficult for anyone focused on not losing ground to actually see the humanity in those that they are afraid of. Because of that, the more ingrained they are in maintaining the status quo, the more they will resist when evidence is presented that counters their narrative. Because the longer you dehumanize and the longer you oppress others to keep what you like, the harder it is to admit that you were wrong. It's the sunken cost fallacy on full display. When you're in this deep, there's seemingly no going back. Once again, Falwell demonstrates this perfectly. He agreed to resign as Liberty University's president, but after the media announced his resignation, he immediately took it back. Instead of just owning his betrayal and accepting the consequences, he decided to fight it in order to keep power. I've met parents who have spiritually and emotionally abused their children, believing they are doing the right thing. And the longer the abuses continue, the more they see any disagreement with their parenting style as attacks of the devil. Because no parent wants to admit they've been harming their children for their entire lives. So the longer they do so, the more entrenched they become in maintaining their perception of reality. It's protection. They can't be wrong, because to be wrong would require them to acknowledge potentially decades of being wrong. So what do you and I do about this? How do we respond to this unhealthy obsession with having power over others instead of empowering others? First, when making decisions about politics or church leaders, ask yourself this question: what flow of power are they promoting? See, it's okay for someone to seek a position of leadership or power, and it's okay for someone to exist in the spotlight. Celebrities aren't bad or evil in and of themselves, but what they do with their influence, money, and power matters. When we look to support leaders, we should support those who are looking to empower those that society would consider beneath them. What is that leader, pastor, principal, etc. going to do with the power that we give them? Second, do a self-assessment. What do you do with power? When you are put in a position of authority, whether over friends, family, or strangers, how do you wield your authority? You can even ask loved ones what they have seen you do. But be ready for a potential answer that you don't like. And if it turns out that you've used power irresponsibly, then now you have the opportunity to apologize and seek to rebuild bridges and heal broken relationships. Third, and this is the most important question that you can ask: what do you believe should be done to and about those you consider your enemies? If you were put in a position of power over your enemies, what would you do? An honest answer will tell you a whole lot about how you view power and what you would do with it. Reading Revelation and Jesus' own words about the last days, power dynamics play a major role. The correct relationship that Jesus calls for Christians to have with power is one that seeks to utilize power as a tool to serve others, not as a way to lord ourselves, our beliefs, or our preferences over those that we don't like. It is by definition a sacrificial love. Jerry Falwell Jr. is a poignant reminder that those you should trust the least are those who either promise you the most power, those who seek to ally themselves with the most powerful, or those who seek to consolidate power to themselves without making plain their intentions through both word and action. It's high time we reclaim a proper relationship with power and authority, both in our personal lives and our public ones. If you've made it this far, thanks for watching. And if you're interested in engaging with any of my content, check out the description for links to my podcasts Absurdity and A Beautiful Faith, as well as other great shows on the Absurd Podcast Network. And if you liked this video, leave a thumbs up, click that subscribe button, and share it with a friend. Now, as always, enjoy some footage of my corgi Sugar to brighten your day.